Hi, hello, how are you? I am Scout, and today I'm going to be going over every single book I read this fall. This fall I read about 6 or 7 books, and so I'll be going over each of them, kind of giving a brief description of like the plot or what the book is about, my personal thoughts on the book, and then a rating out of 5. And this was kind of a mixed bag. For fall, I read a couple books that were out of my comfort zone, and that kind of led to what you're gonna see, but I'm gonna dive in. I'm gonna start with So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson. So I read this for my book club, and I really liked this. This is a nonfiction book about the history of public shaming. Now, if I had one criticism of this book, is that it really stays in the 21st century of online media shaming. It doesn't go a lot into the past. I thought we were going to talk about like, we used to publicly put people in stockades and shame them for things. And like he mentions that, it just doesn't go very deep into that. It's mostly focused on people who've made transgressions on like Twitter, Facebook, and the ramifications that they see over a period of time and how the internet has shaped shaming culture. I thought this was super interesting, and this was extremely interesting reading, and then dealing with the Sydney Sweeney thing like happening in real time, where I was like, oh, applying some knowledge from this book. I ended up really liking this. I thought it was really interesting. It's a little dry at points, but I find that in general Jon Ronson's writing is much more like pop nonfiction, where he tends to keep it kind of lighthearted, breezy, easy to read, which I don't think is like a problem with nonfiction. There are people who do like dislike an easier to read version of nonfiction. I don't have that issue. I think it was fine. I don't know if I'd read it again. This kind of feels like a one-time read, but I definitely think other people in my life would really enjoy it. I think my dad would really like this book. What I would rate it out of 5. I try to never pick my ratings until I make the video because I like to think of like, what did I actually think about it? I think I'd put this at a 3 out of 5. I think this book was good, but I think like a 4 would be like a book that I want to reread, and a 5 is like an instant classic in my life. So I think this one kind of settles at a 3. One of the other books that I read was The Best of Everything by Rona Jaffe. And I have talked about this book a couple of times on the channel because I used this in my Taylor Swift book video, and it was in my book haul. So I did finish this book from my book haul. It was fantabulous. I love it. This book follows a couple of different women as they live through New York and their experiences as working women in like the 50s. I loved it so much. I thought this book was so great. It feels really, really timeless. This is definitely an instant classic to me. This is like a 5 out of 5 stars. This is my second Rona Jaffe, and I loved her first book that I read, which is Mr. Right is Dead. I don't think that's her first book though. It definitely made me want to read more Rona Jaffe, and so I definitely will. I loved this book so much. This is definitely a recommend to like anybody, and might be a contender to move into my favorite books of all time. Like, this book is so good, and I will definitely be rereading this. Next book, it was another book club book. This is Passing by Nella Larson, and I enjoyed this so much. I read it in one day. It's a short book, so that it is doable to read in one day. This is about 2 women who are both Black, but one of them is can pass as a white woman, and it is about how their lives have diverged since the one moved out of their hometown. So the one that could pass as white moved out of their hometown and actually married like a racist man, and they reunite as adults and kind of evaluate how their lives have gone, and it is so good. I didn't realize that this was also written in the past too, so it's really interesting to see like how those issues were being talked about in the past. I knew this book was old. I didn't realize that it was as old as it is. It is so good. I love this. I'm definitely going to reread this. This is so phenomenal and so interesting, and talks a lot about like race dynamics and race dynamics inside racial groups. specifically of like the relationship that a white passing Black woman and a Black woman can have with each other. It was really interesting, and I think I've seen a lot of discussion about this book in general from women in the Black community saying, I've seen a couple videos that talked about like how they felt like it still had glimmers of accuracy about that dynamic between that two groups of women. And so I really loved this book. This is, for me, again, a 5 stars. I read a couple 5 stars in fall, and then a couple of real stinkers. We'll get to the stinkers. But I loved this book. This book is so good. I don't know if it will contend for a favorite of all time, but it is definitely like a phenomenal book. Maybe a 4.5 out of 5, just because I don't think it's like a favorite of mine. Next book, you know what, I'm gonna take like a big tonal shift and go into something that I'm a little bit more negative about. I branched out. I don't really like romance books. There's nothing wrong. I actually like romance in general. I like rom-coms a lot. But I don't typically read rom-com books. I tend to get really frustrated with elements of characters or how characters are written, because that might be an element that someone else thinks is romantic and I actually think is really weird and uncomfortable. So I definitely am not always a fan with romances. I find them very hit or miss. And this one was a miss for me personally, but there were elements that I still felt gleamed through. And that was If It Makes You Happy by Julie Olivia. I went to one of those bookstores that is all romance themed. My friend is gonna come down to where I live. She lives where I used to live. And she's gonna come down, and she loves romance books. So I wanted to like scope out this place and see if it would be a place to take her. And when I was there, the women are so charming at that store, and that store is so cute that I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna pick out a book. I'm gonna read one of the books. And they were like, you like Gilmore Girls, you like Autumn, like you should read this book. And it does feel like it's trying to emulate that vibe, and I think sometimes it does achieve the autonomal 90s kind of vibe, but I did have some issues with this book. So first I should probably go over like the general plot. It is about a working girl who, her mother dies and she goes to take over the inn. And I actually liked the setup for this book a lot, because normally I hate it when they have like woman goes and abandons her entire life to go and do this other thing. Basically, her sister is in college and is in her like last 2-3 months of school. And the sister is going to take over the inn. That's the plan. And they just need someone to run it in the interim while the sister finishes college. So she takes a sabbatical from work to go and do this for 3 months because her sister's gonna go take over the job. And I actually liked that as a plot because that does make sense, and jobs will do sabbaticals like that for a shortened period of time. It had like a nice ticking clock element to it. I liked a lot of the setup. She meets the neighbor who is friends with her parents, and he is like a baker, and he is notably a single dad with 2 young daughters, so there's 3 of them in the house. And his wife like left him because she didn't want to live in the town. She was kind of never wanting to stay in the town and ended up leaving. And they're both divorcees, which I liked. Again, there were a lot of elements that I really enjoyed, but there were issues. I wasn't sure that they would actually be a good couple because she's really, really guarded, and she doesn't progressively soften in a real tangible way. We can hear her POV, so we do hear her like emotionally soften, but she doesn't open up to him, or at least open up when we get to see it. So I feel like even though we know she's becoming softer and kinder, that it isn't translating into the rest of the book. He sometimes is too gooey with his kids. This is a thing that romance people think like people love, where it's like, he is so kind to every child and every child loves him. He's like a big brother. And I'm like, like he should be a dad. Like he needs to be doing his job. And so I just sometimes found scenes with his kids, specifically the youngest daughter, to be pretty grating, because very much the youngest daughter is like the titular kid character in a holiday romance movie where they're kind of annoying, where you're like, no kid is actually like that. And it was sometimes very irritating to read plot lines with that little kid, because that little kid was like the scapegoat in this book for, oh, they're not close anymore. It's because the dog attacked the little kid. And you're like, okay, like I'm good. Most of the conflict felt realistic in this book. There were 3 things that I didn't love in this book, and 2 of them are in print issues. And I found out, based on this, that this is apparently a very normal thing in newer romance books, which I don't like. Putting a playlist in your book. I really don't like that, and also I misinterpreted it the first time I read it, which made me like it even less. So she numbered the playlist, which is where the confusion happened. And you'll probably be like, oh, I can see where that confusion happened. When you number the playlist and also number your chapters, the immediate thought is, oh, chapter 1, this song, chapter 2, this song, which then spoils the book, you know? Luckily that wasn't what she meant, which, like, thank God. It does match up for the first couple, which is why I was like, oh gosh, like, you're just gonna like spoil the book, like I now know what's gonna happen in chapter 9 because you wrote a playlist. Luckily that is not the case, but it's not differentiated like that. I don't know why she numbered it. I really think you shouldn't number it if it's not meant to be chapter by chapter. And the other thing is about these playlists. It is encouraging you to engage in something separate from their content, which always makes me think that you don't think your content is gripping enough on its own, that you're relying on someone else's emotionally evocative work. Especially the music that she picked, I'm like, this is music that deeply resonates with people. And to be like, put this on in the background while you read, clues me into that you don't trust that I will get the emotional intent behind your book, which makes me feel like you don't trust your own writing, which is never a good thing as an author, to hint at your audience that you potentially don't think your work is worthy of their time. And this is a long book, so that kind of behavior I don't enjoy in an author. The playlist thing I just don't think is very interesting. The other annoying thing, again in print, is the author's note. And I love an author's note. I read author notes like nobody's business. This one has a content warning list. And I am pro content warning lists. I am not one of those people who dislikes them or anything like that. This, unfortunately, this author's note and this content list does fall into the category of not something I think is appropriate. It has this little note, and it says, like, there's gonna be lots of cliches in the book, and it's super fun, and it's nostalgic. It's like trying to like tell your reader beforehand, like, you're gonna have fun. This is gonna be cool. It's gonna be cliche a little bit. So you're, again, kind of like, it's the same thing of like not believing in your writing, that your writing can stand for itself. And I did not like that beginning intro from the author. And then the content warning section. A lot of this is not worthy of a content warning, is like the only way I can think of it. Death of a parent from heart attack, in parentheses, off page. I'm like, that didn't need to be mentioned. Also, if you read the back, it says that. So if someone is like deeply harmed by like reading a book with like that, which I won't, like, that's totally fine if that's how you feel. But if you read the back of the book, you know that's in there. So like, we're not trusting our audience, that our audience is even reading what the book is about beforehand. And like, cheating off page. not main characters is the other designation. I'm like, okay, so now you're also spoiling the plot. And this is like one of the first pages in the book. So you hit this automatically if you open up the book. And for someone like me personally, none of these are content warnings that I needed to know about beforehand. It does spoil the book. And also, the first one is descriptive romantic scene. And if you're picking up a book that looks like this, you know that that's in there and that you're willing to be partaking in that. It felt a little like you don't trust your audience. And it was giving like SEO book, which I was really disliking, like especially that author's note really put a bad taste in my mouth of like, you just looked up like trendy things for romance book. And the biggest thing is she the most revolutionary writer in the world? No. Was I actively looking for a revolutionary book? No. I was looking for a book that was fun, that gave me the right vibes. And that was exactly what she delivered. And I think that's what a lot of her readers are looking for. So all these constant like, you're gonna like it, it's really fun. I'm like, do you not trust your work? It's good. Why are you doing this? And these two elements really like decreased my enjoyment of the book because I was like, you don't believe in your book at all. And I was just like, I wasn't super in love with that. The other big thing that I disliked about this book is there is a moment at the very beginning that itches at something that's so interesting, and then it never fully gets picked up again. The main character has a fraught relationship with her mother who has passed on because her mother, it is implied, it's never said directly, had like postpartum depression when she was a kid and missed out on her childhood, but then when she had her second daughter, she was in a lot better of like a headspace and like cared about her other daughter. So the oldest child, which is the main character, I don't think I've said her name's Michelle. When Michelle, as like an adult, she kind of resents her mom because she didn't have this experience with her mom that everyone else talks about. And we never really get into that. And I wasn't hoping for a neat resolution to it, and Julie doesn't offer that to you either. Not like she wrote a note to her daughter from beyond the grave that was like, I loved you always. Like, it's not anything like that. It's not corny or anything. But we never get to fully talk about it, and the character never gets even a calming resolution, not necessarily like a resolution of, and I'm gonna move on. It's just like a thing that makes her heart feel calm. We never get that. And I feel like we should have, especially because the author has talked about how she wanted this book to be like a warm blanket, like a cozy vibe. I'm like, leaving that main character with this like really weird, like existential dread doesn't really feel cozy, fun, and calm. And so it was just like this odd moment where I was like, are we gonna pick that back up? Like, I was like, we are barreling towards the end. We're never gonna get this, huh? I still think this book is like worth people's time if they're interested in like a cozy book. I just had some like fundamental issues with the book that maybe are genre specific, which is again why I don't often read romances. I'm trying to think about what to rate this. Because a lot of it has to do with the book packaging and not necessarily the book itself, I want to give it a 3. But if I'm thinking about the other book that I gave a 3, I think this book is so much better than this book. Like that these are incomparable books. I think this book's gonna get a 2 out of 5 because it just does not deserve to sit with this book, but it isn't bad. And this is definitely a book that if this is the type of book you like to engage in, it is worth reading. And it's well done. She's not an author that I think doesn't have a merit. It's just, I don't know if she trusts her work or trusts the reader to engage with her work. And that kind of bums me out. Okay. I have 2 more books that I'm going to talk about today. You know what? I'm going to end on a bummer, so I'm going to talk about a book that I loved. I read The Bell Jar. So this book has also appeared on my channel before. This was in the same book haul as this book. And I read it, like I said, in November. It felt like a November vibe. And I loved it. And it made me feel so many different emotions. And the biggest emotion at the end was sadness. And we'll get into it. So basically the premise is this is about a woman named Esther. She goes on this like scholarship trip to New York. And so the beginning part starts with her in New York and then her coming back to her hometown and kind of mentally unraveling and going to a mental facility. And wow, is this book so good. It is so sad at moments. I do just like want to put it out there. This is an older book. It's written in the 1950s. There's racism, like just fully in the book. That is not condemned. It is clearly written in because that was like what was applicable at the time period. I really dislike the way that some content creators approach discussing like racial issues in older books, where they either cast off the book or completely excuse the behavior in the book, by being like, it's like a product of its time. This book is like quite literally a product of its time. It is written about how they dealt with mental health issues in the 1950s. The racism is not a product of its time. There were people in the 1950s who did not believe the things that are written in this book. So I don't love the immediate, it's a product of its time, we are just gonna not acknowledge it. But I also dislike any book that has a bad take is immediately cast off as a book that we can't engage with. I saw a post where someone was recommending a different book and basically was shaming The Bell Jar and was like, it's The Bell Jar but without the racism. It's the one that should really be a classic. And I was like, we don't need to be doing this. You can acknowledge that there's actively racist parts of The Bell Jar. Like, that's happening in this book. But not go, and so we must disregard it as a text. Like, that doesn't need to be happening either. I think this book is still worthwhile. I still think this is important. I think it is well written. I like this book. And I think this book is worth being read. I do think, at most, there should be like a disclaimer of like, hey, this book has racism in it. And yes, we need to have that conversation about the fact that there is books that are classics that do have racism in them. But we should not discount works of art because of that, but we should talk about it. We can't just pretend it's not there. That's kind of like my feeling on that. But just in case you did not know that, because there are people who don't know that that's in this book, and then they read it and it's kind of like a, whoo. I just want to mention there is racism in this book. But The Bell Jar is really well written. It's very good. And the biggest thing that happened for me was like a pit of despair that opened up at the end of this book, for me personally, because of how it ends, which I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to spoil the ending of this book. But I just know that if I had read this book at any other point in my life, this would have been actively detrimental to me. I'm so glad I read it at this period of my life. But wow, is this really good? This book is very, very good. I'm so happy I've read it. I really want to read more Sylvia Plath. I always kind of suspected that I would like Sylvia Plath. Great confirmation. And yes, there's just nothing. The only thing I would change about the book is I would remove the racism and be like, let's stop doing this. That's like the only thing I'd want to remove from the book. I think the book is really well written. I think it's really interesting, and the way that it talks about mental health is really important. And this book is based off of feelings that Sylvia Plath really had in real life, and I think that's important. And I don't think it's myopic. I think that's a criticism that gets kind of unfairly lobbed at Sylvia Plath, that she was often hyper myopic. And I don't think that that is true. And I think this book is really good and worth reading. And what would I give it as a rating? it made me feel so deeply. I think I have to give this a 5 out of 5. Like these two books were so phenomenal and so important to me. I really, really, really loved these. Okay, we're gonna end on a low note, okay? Kind of switching gears to a book that I have pretty heavily disliked. And it is actually the most recent book I finished. My bookmark is still literally in the book. And that is Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. So I read this book for my book club, same book club that we read Passing and So You've Been Publicly Shamed. So this is kind of a miss for me. I know a lot of other members of my book club did actually like it, so good for them. I am so happy that they liked it. And this ended up having the issue of it did one thing I didn't like, and then slowly it started to just build. Like any issue I was having became bigger than it actually was. This book is not poorly written. This book is not unentertaining. This book is good. Like it is not poor. Like I can't emphasize how much that this book is just purely a book not for me. There is nothing inherently bad about this book, just not for me. Basic premise. There is a character named Sally. She works for SNL. They will call it TNO, the Night Owls. It's SNL. I just think she legally couldn't get the rights to call it SNL. And she's a writer, and she kind of has this belief based on evidence. So it's not crazy unfounded, but she has this belief that a hot guy would never go for a girl who's less attractive. And her evidence is her experience on the set of TNO. And that these really hot female guest stars have come in and performed and then fallen in love with one of the schlubby male writers. And she's like, that would never happen if it was a hot guy and a schlubby girl. And then it happens to her. That's the premise. And I had a couple of issues with this. The first one, which is not in the jacket flap, which I think, put it in the jacket flap, okay? Is that this book heavily deals with the pandemic. And that is totally fine. I honestly think it's important that we have work that does talk about the pandemic. And I've seen the pandemic used really, really well in other media. So that wasn't immediately a turn off in the book, but the main character is a ranty, kind of on the soapbox kind of character. And just hearing her complain during the pandemic about things that I also complained about during the pandemic, I'm like, yeah, girl, I get it. I lived through this. I actually feel the same way. So it became a little tiresome and a little annoying because I was like, yeah, I felt this exact same thing. And it actually exhausted me to continually keep being why are people acting like this? So for me, I really disliked the pandemic element in the book. Also, because that main character is a little bit ranty and soapboxy, and she definitely uses humor to cope with issues, she at points is grating. And I'm not adverse to an unlikable female character. I quite literally, if you're talking unlikable female lead, bell jar. But I have a big issue with this character, Sally. She almost seems, at moments, there were moments, I had to look. Curtis is a woman, by the way. I did not know that. I thought it was a man. When I first initially started the book, I was like, oh, it's a guy making fun of women like this. It almost, that's how it felt. And there is some issues that I'm going to talk about with the writing of some of the characters that I had with this book. And that the spirit of this book, which I feel is a little not positive or kind. But I just really started to dislike this female lead character. And I also wasn't intrigued by the love interest. So I was kind of struggling with characters to like. The only characters I really liked were her two female friends who don't really appear in the book, which was a kind of major bummer. One of my other issues with the book was it's the spirit. We're talking about the spirit of this book. When I first read the jacket flap, the basic premise, I was like, oh, this is like someone writing in response to the fact that like Ariana Grande was the musical guest at SNL and then fell in love with Pete Davidson, and like kind of making fun of that phenomenon. Like super hot girl dates guy who people don't think is hot, and then it happened twice because then he did that with Kim Kardashian. I was like, that's exactly what this book is referencing. And yeah, it feels like it's referencing that, and it seems like it's really mean-spirited about that and like mad at Pete Davidson, which I was like, I don't know what he did to you personally. I looked it up. She has no relationship to him, so like I don't know why this book feels so mean-spirited. It feels a little mean-spirited towards men and also women. It seems weirdly obsessed with vanity for being a book that's clearly supposed to be like, vanity is bad, you should love someone for who they are. It's weirdly vain. The main character talks a lot about, like the main character Sally, who's the one who has the belief, talks a ton about other people's physical appearances, which I thought, and I still think, is purposeful to show that she's insecure about how she physically appears, so she hyperfixates on everyone else's physical appearances. Totally makes sense. But the book emphasizes so much physical appearance that it does feel at some point, and here's the kicker, Sally, the main character, isn't ugly. She's not. She's just insecure. And so kind of the big thing in this book is it feels like it's saying vanity is wrong, you should love someone for who they are, but the book doesn't have the balls to make the main character actually ugly. This is like that movie The Uglies that came out, where they casted a pretty person to play the character that's ugly. I'm like, what? Like, stick to your guns. And the book in the jacket flap kind of describes it like the schlubby guys, which like means like the unkempt guys, the guys who like burp and fart and like don't really care about their physical appearance, or like they wear the same sweatshirt like 5 days in a row. But she's never really doing any of that. She like talks about in the book how she like waxes like and bleaches her mustache and stuff in anticipation of hanging out with the guy. And I'm like, I feel like a real schlubby lazy person isn't doing all that. And like the most schlubby thing she does is sleep in her office. But when you hear her work schedule, you're like, that's literally the only thing you could do. Like none of it seems schlubby. And so the book seems to have a weird tone and spirit because it seems like it's supposed to be condemning, like making fun of people, but it is definitely making fun of men who are ugly, getting to date hot women. And it's also like not actually practicing what it preaches because the main character isn't ugly. It's kind of got a weird vibe to it. The third, this is when I was getting into, I'm being a hater, I'm gonna start hating. And the only reason I continued reading was because it's for my book club, which I run, so I literally, and I picked this book, so I had to finish it, was I could tell that the writer was from the Midwest, and then I read the jacket flap and confirmed it. She talks about a Midwestern grocery store. She talks about Hy-Vee. And I know about Hy-Vee because I used to live in the Midwest. But she talks about Hy-Vee like 4-ish times in this book. And she talks about Hy-Vee like it is the beloved Midwestern grocery store. Like, everyone loves Hy-Vee. Hy-Vee is the best. I'm missing Hy-Vee. And I'm like, no. No. That is not the case. I've lived in multiple states in the Midwest. Hy-Vee is not a thing in every state. It isn't. So this weird conversation about Hy-Vee, I was like, girl, why do you care so much about Hy-Vee? Do you have like stake in the company? Like, it was weird the amount she talked about Hy-Vee. And also this main character like moved from the Midwest and like loves being a New Yorker. And I'm like, but she can't stop talking about Hy-Vee. Like, that's the one thing she misses from the Midwest? What? It was very weird. And I was like, this woman has to be from the real Midwest because like there's no way she's just casually referencing Hy-Vee. But it is like the most non-Midwestern thing ever to Google grocery stores and then be like, I'm gonna mention Hy-Vee because it's not a big thing anywhere else. It was just like a weird moment that I just like couldn't get over. I was like, why do you like Hy-Vee so much? And also, this is not me saying that I hate Hy-Vee. Literally all of my reusable shopping bags are Hy-Vee bags. Like, I obviously like Hy-Vee, but it was just like a weird focus on Hy-Vee that I was like, oh, like, what's going on? So I just had a couple of like fundamental issues with this book that I just didn't really like, and I just wish weren't included. This book is the most easy example of not for me. Like, this book is not poorly written or anything. It's just so not me and so not what I wanted to read, even though the basic premise I was so excited for. This had been on my TBR for years, and I was like, oh, I cannot wait to read this. I'm gonna be so excited. This is gonna be so fun. And then it was not fun for me. Maybe I built it up too much in my head. I don't think I did, because I don't really do that with books, but I did not love this. How many stars would I give it? Okay, I'm trying to decide because I'm like between a 1 and a 2. My thing is, it's not poorly written, so like it really shouldn't be a 1. But like if we're comparing it to this book, which I just rated a 2, and this book, I would rather reread this book because I thought this book was so fun. I just don't think the author believes it's fun. So I think I'm gonna have to give rom-com a 1 out of 5. Like, I genuinely just like, this is so not for me. But honestly, if you are interested in the plotline and the pandemic thing doesn't bother you, and the Hy-Vee grocery behavior doesn't bother you, and the weird spirit doesn't bother you, read this book. It is well written, and the writer clearly knows a lot about everything else she's talking about. So like, I don't think this book is unworthy of people's time. It was unworthy of my time, but not other people's. If this is what you're into, then it is worthy of your time. Okay, these are all the books that I read this fall. I'm very excited. Some general housekeeping notes. I believe I'm still gonna be doing 2 videos all the way to the 1-year anniversary of the channel, which I'm really excited about. I am hopefully gonna put another one of my Taylor Swift book clubs out. I think it's gonna be Evermore, just like based on like my compilations of books. And I think some more of the Shelf Care series is going to be coming out, as well as the book basics. I am going to have to do a pause on the gift guide for more boyish books. I was compiling it and I like had talked to my dad and everything, but then I just didn't feel super comfortable talking about a bunch of books that I didn't read. And so I wanted to try and read some of those books and maybe do it the next December time of throwing them into a compilation so that I can actually recommend them with more knowledge about them. So I hope that's okay. I hope no one was pining deeply for that video. But that is all I have for you today, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.